So the question that we are pondering is, what relationship, if any, exists between mass and volume? And so I've got two different samples of matter. The first one is kind of a goldish in color. The other sample that I have is copper in color. And I've got three different amounts of these two different types of matter. And so again, we're trying to identify what relationship, if any, exists between mass and volume. So it becomes apparent that in order to identify a relationship that exists between the two, that we need to measure the mass and the volume of each substance. And so I'm going to be using a caliper to identify the overall length, width, and height of each one of these samples. I could do the same thing as far as identifying the volume by using a graduated cylinder and submersing each one of these samples and then identifying the difference that occurs from the initial volume to the final volume. But I think because it's a regular shape, it's going to be a lot easier to identify my volume by measuring the length, the width, and the height, and multiplying all three of those together to determine the volume. As far as measuring mass, I'm just going to put it on the scale and measure the mass that way in grams. I will be measuring the length, the width, and the height in centimeters. And so I'll store all of this information in my nice little data sheet here. So we're going to start with the gold samples. The first sample is 2.5 centimeters. By 2.5 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters. And now I'm going to measure the mass of this object. And the mass is 139.36. And that's grams. Our next gold sample is 0.75 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters. And the mass of this object is 43.85 grams. And my final sample, the small sample of the same material, is 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. And the mass of this one is 7.6 grams. right, so our table is completely filled out for our gold colored samples. Now I'm going to move on to a different sample, a different type of matter. And we'll start with the small one first and work our way to the larger one. So this one is again 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter for the volume. And this object's mass is 7.67. My next largest sample, my medium sample, is 2.5 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters by 0.75. And that object's mass is 43.22 grams. And my largest sample, 2.5 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters. And its overall mass is 144.84 grams. And just as a reminder, we are trying to identify the following question. What relationship, if any, exists between mass and volume? So I think at this point you have all of the information you should need for this lab. Again, we're trying to identify what relationship, if any, exists between mass and volume. Spend some time using the data that we have here to formulate an experiment for how we might go about determining the relationship that exists.